Thank you, François. Good afternoon, everybody. It's quite an honor to be the private sector representative in this distinguished company of professors. So thanks for the invitation. To me, it's always very refreshing to have this opportunity to get out of the routine and to, in fact, look back at what we're doing. And so I'm really delighted today to share with you some thoughts, have a discussion on how a big industrial and services company is in fact trying to reinvent its business model in order to participate and to contribute, to take one part of its responsibility to contribute to the so-called green economy. So improve our environmental, social, and also quality of governance performance and help our clients do so. And I think the key words really that we are really embedding in the organization, it's gradual, it's this notion of cooperation, co-construction, and interdependence. So maybe a few words on Suez Environment, because I'm not sure you know us well. It's quite a complex organization, but so we have two businesses. We manage water systems, the entire cycle of the water system, and we manage the entire cycle of the waste streams. We are a global company present in America, Mexico, Latin America, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Northern Africa, in China, in Australia. But most of our business really is still done in Europe, maybe 65 to 70%, mostly in France and Spain in the water, and Northern Europe, France, UK, Benelux, Sweden in the waste business. We have about 80,000 employees, and to give you an idea of the size, we generate about 12 billion euro of turnover. Globally, we supply water to over 90 million people, and we provide access to wastewater services to over 60 million people. It's quite interesting to note that, in fact, today we serve more people in China than we serve in France, for example. So the clients that we have, the clients are local governments, cities, of course, the inhabitants of those cities, but also industrial companies, services companies, but also increasingly the agricultural business, the agribusiness, farmers, and also urban development agencies. So a quite complex array of clients. Beyond those clients, increasingly important, we are also dealing with a lot of numerous and complex stakeholders. Everywhere we intervene, we have businesses, we have to interact with all the layers of government. Depending on the places, it can be national layer, it can be regional or departmental or communal level. We also interact with ministries, regulators, international financing institutions. They sometimes are lenders to our business, but we also have joint programs, joint capacity building programs with those institutions. We interact increasingly with environmental protection NGOs or civil society NGOs. And here again, I think we are in a new era of relationship. We are no longer into this confrontational relationship, but we are gradually, and we have numerous examples of that, commonly building environmental measurement tools, for example, and I'll give you a few examples later. We are doing common capacity buildings, common pedagogy with those NGOs. Of course, we have our shareholders. I would not want to forget them as very important stakeholders. And we have the wider investor base as shareholders, and you know that increasingly there is a fraction, a movement of the so-called socially responsible investors, and they are increasingly scrutinizing our performance, and we have quite a constructive dialogue with those people. We are also rated by extra financial rating agencies or ESG rating agencies. So you have, by the same token that Moody's and Standard & Poor's are rating the quality of credit of governments or cities or companies, these ESG or extra financial rating agencies are giving an assessment of the genuineness or the quality of our, let's call it, extra financial performance. And to us, it's very important and very constructive. Of course, another very important stakeholder are the employees and the trade unions. And increasingly in the company, and of course here there are French biases, but we are engaging with trade union representatives into this shaping of the so-called CSR policies. So, having said all this, I'd like to share with you a few tendances lourdes. So, as we said earlier, a few challenges that are also opportunities for our businesses. So, some of them are really, I think, specific to our businesses, and others are more common to other organizations. So, the first tendance lourde in the water business is that we are going from what we are calling a small water cycle, i.e. being involved with the production and distribution of potable water in a city or in a region, and collecting the wastewater and treating it. We are moving from this kind of business model that was our business model for decades, over a century, to something that we would call a larger water cycle, where in fact we are being dragged, but we are happy to go there, into a more global discussion on water resources management, integrated water resource management, and then of course our traditional business of the distribution of water and treatment of wastewater. And downstream, we are seeing a new appetite for more services to the users of water. So this is what we usually call the water demand management. So as you can imagine, this is very interesting because the traditional business in developed countries, the business model really is, in many places, you multiply the volumes that you sell by a unit price, and this finances the water system. And in the developed countries, this is no longer sustainable because the volumes are dropping. So the financing of the whole system is jeopardized. So we have to invent a new way of financing the global water system. This is true for developed countries because obviously in re-emerging countries or emerging countries, the trend is still very different with growing volumes, and there the volumes can finance, and this would bring us on a tariff structure discussion, which is not the purpose here. But so this is, the point is the business model has to be reinvented, and so we are quite interested and happy to enter into this large cycle of water management. This, for example, to give you a few concrete examples, includes, when we talk about resource management, of entering into discussions with cities and local governments about alternative water resources. I mean the reuse of treated wastewater, for example. In many cases, from an economic and environmental standpoint, this makes a lot of sense. In other places, where I would call them affluent places, desalination can be a solution. I am not promoting it in all water scarce regions, but in many places, in places where there is a capacity to pay for that, it can be a solution. And for example, in Australia, there are a lot of projects around desalination. If I move quickly to the waste business, the big tendance lourde trend is really, in most places, in fact, going from, let's call it waste disposal to waste recovery. In fact, if we would have time, we would discuss the fact that a long time ago, the issue about waste was just to take waste out of the cities. And then the issue was taking waste outside of the cities and, in fact, landfilling it. Now we are in an era, for many, many reasons, of environmental protection, resource scarcity, climate change, aspiration for higher standards of living. We are in an era of waste recovery. And waste recovery means material recovery, so recycling, in fact, manufacturing secondary raw materials, to energy recovery, making energy, steam, electricity out of waste, out of incinerating waste, and also agricultural recovery in the form of various forms of composts. So these are the two big trends, and I would say there is a third trend which is very specific to our businesses, which is the perennial and very complex question of access to water and sanitation. Here again, it would be the topic of a full day of conference, but we recognize that we have a responsibility in this kind of issue. And then these were the specific issues to our business. There are many other important trends that we recognize and to which we think we have a part of responsibility to bring solutions, which are more common. I'm thinking about the question of energy efficiency, the broader question of energy climate strategies. And here there is a very interesting discussion to be had about environmental accounting. We are engaging with various organizations, national ones, professional ones, on trying to stabilize, if we could make a financial analogy, the IFRSs of environmental accounting. Because as you know, this is a field that needs some rationalization, some standardization. We are doing a very interesting research work on water footprinting, but really going beyond the volume approach towards an impact approach. And I launched some internal research works on a simple question, but I haven't found any literature on that. What is the water footprint of a water utility? I looked in the internet and I haven't found anything. We have water footprints for hamburgers, jeans, whatever, but you don't have the water footprint of a water utility. I thought it was an interesting question. Another trend, which I found also fascinating, is this question of, it was addressed by many speakers, of information, access to information by citizens in order to contribute to the public debate. And here I have this very big curiosity towards this trend of open data. You know, the action of local governments or national governments of releasing public data to the public so that we don't know what is going to happen out of it, but some people will take this data and innovate with it, invent new services or products. I think it's very interesting, and you might have seen that the European Environmental Agency is launching some experiments to have citizens provide environmental quality data. I think this is very interesting, and we have engaged into collaborations with experts of this kind of trends. And in fact, we have gone further than that, because there is a place in France, I can't cite it, but we have been proactive and we have told the local government, here is our data, if you want to use it, you know, we sample the water quality on bacteriological and physicochemical issues, you know, every 5 seconds or so. So we measure the temperature, the pH, the heights of rivers. We have a wealth of environmental data that sometimes organizations are spending millions on gathering. I'm not saying it's easy, but under good governance, and there are a lot of questions about that. Who is the owner of that data? But anyway, we have put this kind of data at the disposal of some local governments if they wanted to use it, for innovation purposes. In fact, the trend is a bit slower than what we could have anticipated, but nevertheless, I think it's this question of information, access to information, is a very powerful one, and it's one that private companies, as other organizations, have to tackle. This also brings a discussion about us, private companies, as capacity builders. Again, if we would be alone to do capacity building, we might be sort of as trying to promote our own interests, but so we are doing that through partnerships with universities. I am teaching classes in various places, and so this is very important to in fact spread knowledge. Again, as I mentioned about information, we have a wealth of expertise that has to be shared with academics and with think tanks and NGOs. Of course, there are these social issues as well, which are more and more important. We are concerned about questions of inequality, even though we are not the politicians. We always intervene under a political framework. We are not the one organizing the tariffs, but we can provide expertise on what is a good tariff structure in a particular city or region. Because we have been managing these in many places across the world, in water-scarce regions, in rich regions, in poor regions. So we can share information, we can engage in a discussion on what is a good tariff mechanism. But again, I want to stress that it's not us who is setting the tariff. This has to be set by the local governments. We are only providers of expertise to local governments. However, and this is in the news these days, our affiliate in France has worked with the local government of Dunkerque to propose one of the first tarifs éco-solidaires, so social tariffs for water. Social tariffs for water is something very new. The legal framework has been passed a couple of weeks ago to allow the targeting of people according to their level of wealth. So our example in Dunkerque is going to be a sort of example that will be shared. It has been presented to the government. What are the obstacles? What are the learnings of this kind of experiment? Okay, so these were the trends I think we are coping with, integrating into our strategy formulation and into business execution on the field. Now I'd like to share a few thoughts with you on, in fact, as a private company, how do we manage that? Last year, I think I probably mentioned that we have an internal roadmap. In fact, it's not only internal because it's public. You can go on our website and you can see where we are. So it's a 4-year plan. And I think the originality of this 4-year plan is that we set ourselves targets today for the next 4 years. And most of those targets are quantified. So it's a way for us to engage in a dialogue with whomever is interested. They can follow our progress or our dilemmas or our problems. So we are currently updating our roadmap. We will publish it towards the end of this year. We have to have it approved by our board. And this will be our public commitments. So we're going back here on this CSR issue. What is the business of business? Is it the business of business is business, or is it something else? A big debate here again. But in our case, in addition to the purely financial guidance, because we obviously have this financial guidance to the markets, we are complementing this financial guidance by you could call it an environmental, social, quality of governance guidance. And we have structured this new roadmap around three pillars. The first pillar is to say that we want to continue to grow, to progress, to develop ourselves by helping our clients. I mentioned who are our clients earlier. By helping them to grow whilst reducing their environmental footprint. So we are going to grow by helping our clients, municipalities, industrial clients, better use their water resources, and better recover their waste. And also, we are going to work on our own assets, our own infrastructure, by reducing our own environmental footprint. And this is going to be good because it's going to reduce our costs, it's going to reduce the provisions we'll have to take for risks, and it's hopefully going to make ourselves different from our competitors and hence increase our revenues. So I had a few examples that I probably quoted last year, but I think they're really interesting. For example, in Jordan, we have built for the local government a wastewater treatment plant that is almost self-sufficient in energy. It generates about, depending on the time of the year, but it generates between 80% to 95% of the energy it needs. There is a hydroelectrical electricity generation because the landscape permits it, but there is also methanization of biogas coming from wastewater, and this is used to power the power plant. The other example that I think I quoted last year, which again I think is really very interesting, in the south of France, we have an open-air laboratory. We call it Zone Libellule. And it's an experimentation into how a cocktail of plants and some ecological engineering is able to treat emerging pollutants after wastewater has gone through a wastewater treatment plant. So it's an experiment, it's open, anybody can come and take samples to analyze them if that party wants to share results with us. But these are just a few examples to show how we are, in fact, anticipating on possibly new regulations in the future and going really beyond our business as usual practices. There is another interesting example I like to quote. It's in the suburbs of Shanghai in China. There is a power plant, a coal-fired power plant, and we have built, adjacent to this coal-fired power plant, wastewater sludge. So when you treat wastewater, you have sludge, which is normally considered as a waste. But in this case, we are taking steam from the power plant. With this steam, we are drying the sludge, and we are making pellets out of that sludge, which we are selling to the power plant as a substitute to coal. So in this sense, this is a nice example of industrial ecology, where we are addressing an environmental concern, getting rid of sludge, but in an environmental friendly manner, and on top of that, generating energy and substituting for burning coal. So it would be a very interesting research project, for example, to have a sort of life cycle analysis of the environmental benefits of this kind of industrial ecology. That was our first pillar of strategy, so I would call it the economical, the growth plus environmental pillar. We have a second pillar, which I'm not going to dwell too much on because it's more business as usual. It's about how we empower our employees to act, to be the actors of this transformation. So it revolves about taking commitments on training, taking commitments on health and safety, and also taking commitments on diversity. Some of these things are regulations, but most of them are not regulations. We are here beyond regulation or beyond contractual obligations. And the third pillar, which is probably one of the most interesting really, and which makes the link between this community and us, it's the contribution to the communities. In French, we would call it ancrage territorial, développement des territoires. We believe that in addition to the normal business that we do, we are bringing some positive impacts to the communities. I have one example which I hope will make the case. And this example was brought to me by our director for health and safety, because our health and safety practices are the same all over the world. We don't have health and safety practices in China or Indonesia that are different from our health and safety practices in France or in America. And in fact, we manage the water system of Jakarta, of the west part of Jakarta. And so we have introduced our health and safety policies and procedures in Jakarta. And those practices have become the national practices for health and safety in the water systems in Indonesia. Our procedures, when we are doing works on the streets, they have become the national. Okay, so this is an example which shows that when a company like us is present and intervenes in a territory, beyond the classical elements of employment, paying taxes, doing local procurement, training people, etc., we have a positive impact, and we would be very interested into finding a model, simple and clear, to reveal, in fact, those positive impacts. So we have had discussions with François on these kind of issues, but I think it's a very interesting cooperative project. Reveal the, you could call them negative externalities, but also reveal the positive externalities from a social, development, environmental perspective. So I must, for those of you who are interested, you will see how we present things in this third pillar. We are pledging to contribute to local employment. We are pledging to share some of our knowledge in different forms. We are pledging to co-construct new solutions with industrial partners, with cities, with NGOs. And we are explaining what we do in the field of access to water and sanitation. One last point, maybe, to leave room for questions if you want. Rio, because it was one of the topics. In fact, we went to Rio. For me, it was the first time that I attended one of those huge government-level meetings, but it allowed me to better understand the governance of the United Nations, and I understood that there is a major group, business and industry, and this major group is organized through various organizations. There is one called the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, of which we are member of. And it's very interesting because this organization is a think tank, but also a do tank. They co-produce environmental evaluation protocols. The greenhouse gas protocols, I understand, is co-produced by the water resource, the WRI, the WBCSD. So for us, we went to Rio through this organization, but also what I found interesting, and this is the example that relates me to the co-construction and interdependence. We have made a partnership with UCLG, United Cities and Local Governments, that was quoted earlier on by some speakers. And we realized that, in fact, our advocacy positions are quite similar. So we are now conducting joint projects with UCLG, and we are doing, if you want, some joint advocacy with UCLG, but also with ICLEI. And so we went to Rio because we wanted to express the positions of companies. We are very often vilified, you know, not respecting regulations, firing people, etc. But this is very paradoxical because at the same time, everybody is looking at us for solutions, innovations, jobs, etc. So we thought it was important for us to bring our messages to Rio with other industries as this major group of business and industry. And we are increasingly taking part in the public debate. We published our positions and views at the occasion of Copenhagen in 2009. We explain the issues as we see them. We explain the solutions as we see them, the dilemmas. We did the same thing for biodiversity and ecosystems in 2010 when it was the year of biodiversity. We have explained what we do. We have explained our impacts and our solutions. And so for Rio, we have done the same thing. You can go on our website and you will find our understanding of what is the green economy, the so-called green economies, and how we can and we hope to contribute to it. So as a summary, just I wanted to give you a flavor of how a private, multinational, industrial, but services company with a specific drive towards what we would call in French service public. We're not selling iPhones, we're providing essential services for life. We are changing our business model, our practices, in order to co-construct, to cooperate with as many stakeholders as possible, and also to understand our interdependence. And we're doing that to increase our business. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thomas, I have to say iPhone is very important for life. Okay. Well, yes, but quite interesting. We talked about that many times, you know. I heard about this idea of water footprint, ecological footprint on water utilities. I'll talk about that later. And maybe you have some questions here. Okay, it's open. We have, let's say, well, we'll start a bit later, so 10 minutes.
Hello, first of all, thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the way you want to reduce the environmental footprint. You talk about the tarif éco-solidaire, and I wanted to know because the waste, the price of the people, the taxes for the waste is depending not of the volume of the waste, but of the surface of the houses, and so it's not a way to improve the reduction of the waste impact. And what about this water taxes? It is a way to reduce the volume of water. Is it proportional of the water uses to the people who pay the taxes? Is it depending of the volume you use pour encourager the people to reduce, or is it like waste?
Okay, I will try to answer.
Yeah.
Any other question?
Yes, I have one more question, but I want to be brief because the sun is running out, and I do tend to agree that you are very concerned about social responsibility, social responsibility, because I believe that's the way you can build up. But I really want to ask you one question based on your own understanding. Is it also what your competitors really share with you, the whole notion of co-creation and co-responsibility? Is that something that can be considered as a basis for future value creation for companies that like yours? I'm just talking about the service-oriented and water-oriented companies, because I know you may not have enough information. If you have more time, we can discuss further. Thank you.
I have a very practical question. We have a problem in São Paulo with water. I mean, waters come to practically most houses because water is paid for, but sewage is not paid for, and drinking water, city water, is much further behind still, even if you collect the sewage. How do you treat this imbalance? I understand it in more or less in economic terms, let's say. We're working very much. I mean, in a big city like Sao Paulo, the water problem is becoming a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
If you could comment on this, please.
Okay. So you had some questions, in fact, about taxes and how, in fact, public policy can induce people to either generate less waste or use water more sustainably. So the tax systems are very different, and it's true that at this moment in France, you don't have a price signal or a tax signal to reduce. However, you know that there are some experimentations with tarification incitative, which is, so this is spreading. Technology is there, you know, you have chips on your bins, you have chips on the trucks, so you could do that very easily. There are privacy issues, there are governance issues, but it's coming legally, and the technology is there. For water, as I mentioned today, when you consume 1 cubic meter of water, what you pay for that, there is, as for, well, you have one part which pays for water, and one part that pays for the treatment of wastewater, and then you have a few layers of taxes that will go to finance l'Agence de Bassin or different funds. So you could say that there is an irony here, because the more you consume water, the more you finance the system. And this is the paradox that I pointed out earlier, is that in a context of declining volumes, if we don't re-engineer the whole system, we have a financing issue of the whole system. It's the paradox of being more virtuous will lead you, if the system is to be maintained, to pay a higher tax, a higher price for water. It's paradoxical, it has to be explained. Your question, if that is shared by our competitors, it's I read what our competitors are saying, and our visions are quite similar. Especially in our kind of businesses. Again, we are not in a situation where we have to seduce a consumer, right, on price, marketing, packaging, etc., etc. There is a competition, but once we are in place, we will manage on a monopoly situation that service for the duration of the contract. And then if we're not good, we can be kicked out, etc., etc. I believe that, you know, you mentioned about knowledge, society, etc. I believe that sincerely, businesses believe that they will be sustainable, relevant in the future if they modify their ways, if they transform their ways into harnessing this potential innovation that lies out there. And when I was talking about open data, I think clearly it's a huge democracy debate, in fact. Before being anything else, it's a democracy debate. But you can see easily for a business that it's at the same time an opportunity and a threat, because you already have today websites that are operated by machines, in fact, that are gathering information and putting it in a form that is usable by people. There is, I think, from what I have seen, the Brits are very advanced in that. You have a site called Openly Local, where in fact it's a sort of aggregator of how a city performs. So you will have the graphs about age pyramid, political flavor, etc. But you will also have the financial transactions of that city, because all these individual elements are public information, or should be public information, Freedom of Information Act, etc., etc. But the thing is, nobody aggregates them, and these people are aggregating them, and it's not people, because it can't be people. It's a mixture of machines and people aggregating that data. So it's going to come, this this number crunching, allowing institutions, people to make better decisions. I'm not too idealistic about it because it has to be framed very practically from a legal and governance standpoint, because it can be used for Machiavellic purposes as well. But so I do think that businesses are now in a position where cooperation is perceived as bringing more value than frontal competition, even though we still operate in a competitive market. And so, Ladislas, on your question, how do you, if I understood correctly, your question is how do you treat the imbalance between potable water, and how do you, at the end of the day, how do you finance a modern wastewater treatment system, right?
Let's say you have, take São Paulo, 95% of houses have access to water. Concerning sewage collection, you go down to 70%. Concerning treatment of sewage, you go down to 45%.
Yeah.
They like this very practically because the water is paid for, but sewage collection, sewage treatment is not paid for.
Yeah.
So you generate an imbalance, which in turn generates external costs for health and so forth and so forth.
Okay, I would be a bit tactical here, and I would quote one of our nice examples, which is Santiago De Chile. In Santiago De Chile, our subsidiary Aguas Andinas is in charge of the whole water system under a concession contract. And from in the last 10 years, if you want, they, under the supervision of the local government and in a partnership with the local government, a PPP, a public-private partnership, they increased the treatment of wastewater from 3% back in the 90s to 100% today. So we can maybe discuss this case, but one answer that I give you, and I reckon I'm tactical here, it's properly framed public-private partnerships. Because here the investment was made partially, I don't know the details, but partially by the local government, partially by the private operator under a PPP. And then we opened the debate about the financing of that. How much is going to be financed through the tariff? Maybe it's not sustainable if moving from what you said, 45% to, I don't know what's the target the municipality would want to set, 80%, 90%, 100%. How much would it cost? I mean, we can, engineering consultants can tell how much it would cost. Then it's a political decision. Is it acceptable socially or not to put it through the tariff? Maybe not. Then taxes have to complement what cannot be financed through the tariff. And then maybe a third layer of transfers. So the answer here is one, a properly framed public-private partnership has done the job in Santiago de Chile. And then it's a social and political question, a willingness to pay for that. So here again, all the issues of pedagogy and revealing the positive externalities. Because obviously, I don't know exactly the case of São Paulo, but once you start treating the wastewater, suddenly a lot of things change in terms of public health, in terms of value of the land, in terms of quality of life, etc., etc. So here again, we're back on the question, what's the model to reveal those positive externalities to have people wanting to pay for it? And this brings me to another issue. When I go on holiday with my family and kids, we go and visit the landfills, and we go and visit it's a professional bias, but I find it really interesting, this kind of industrial tourism. And we visit the wastewater treatment plants. And frankly speaking, why are they back in the country, To me, they should be in the middle of the city. They should be nice, clean, transparent, because there's a lot to be learned, and I'm convinced people want to learn about it. So they are not polluting, on the contrary, It's a paradox here again. Those wastewater treatment plants, like in Paris, in Colombes, they should be in the middle of the city and be I was about to say a museum. It's not a museum, it's the future. and we should build schools on them, etc., etc. Yeah, right?
Just a question about what you talked in the EV trends of water. You talked about water minimal management. What exactly you mean by water minimal management? Is it like some section in, like Buttercake or other, or is it water minimal management based on price and tarification?
I said water demand management, right? Is that your question? Water demand management.
Yes. Water demand.
Okay.
It's near. It could be nearest water minimal management.
Okay. Well, the topics here are that people are telling us, the more water you sell, the better you are. Okay, fine, but I think we've gone beyond that, and in fact, many people complain about the price of water, but they don't know how much water costs. Many people don't know how it's measured, and most of us, you get an estimate of your consumption once or twice a year, so you really have no signal. And once you have a big leak, you are very, very angry. So the question here is that we are, with other people, proposing technologies and services and software to manage water intelligently. First of all, to know how much we consume, and at an interval that is an interval that allows you to act properly, not every year, or not even every month, not even maybe on a daily basis. It starts to be interesting. So the price of the technology is going down. So we are in a drive of installing so-called smart meters. It's a customer demand. We have sold these to the SNCF because we have installed water meters and sub-meters, allowing them to know exactly how much water they use in the different parts of their infrastructure. We've done that with managers of public housing, Office HLM. But there is a controversy around that because some people may think it's a very expensive way. The balance of cost and benefits is not there. So I think we have to explain that it's not, because people compare with energy, and especially in England, there were a lot of studies that have shown that, in fact, the installation of those smart meters is not good for the consumer. So we are nowhere near the cost it costs in the electricity field. Huh? So the point here is to show and to provide people with more access and to information about their usage, so that they can plan for and take decisions on real figures, not on estimated figures or on something that they didn't have before. And so this allows for us to sell more services which are useful to plan, to alert, to budget. And there is also a dimension for low-income people, because they have an information on a daily basis and they can better adjust their use. And it's definitely a demand, a market demand from organizations that manage real estate.